In this lecture, I'll introduce location services. The location service APIs are in the location_service privilege group. The location service functions consist of a map function to get maps, a geocoding function to convert coordinates to an address, a routing function to find a route between 2 points, and a directory function that manages major locations. To use the location service, you have to first log onto the location service server. The URL of the bada location server is www.geocoding.com. You need to sign up to create an ID and log into the server. If an application uses the service, authentication is required. If a free application uses a map-related class, a banner advertisement must be embedded into the application. Now, let's take a look at the Service Provider Manager that manages service providers. The Service Provider Manager provides the Connect to Service Provider function that returns the service provider interface, and the Get Service Provider Capabilities N function that returns the available service list. At this time, the service type can be a map, route, geocoding, or direction. Let's take a look at the map service provider in more detail. The map service provider provides the getMapN function that returns the iMaps interface by using the viewport, width, height, and listener. At this time, the area, landmarks, coordinate list, and routes can also be changed. iMaps provides a map object that can be drawn using a graphic context. Now, let's take a look at an example to render a map. First, you need to prepare the server name, the user ID, the password, and the host URL strings to connect to the Decarter server. Then, you need to prepare the listener. Then we'll need to get the service provider by calling the Connect to Service Provider N function of the Provider Manager with the provider name, service type, and login information. As I received the iMaps interface from the service provider without specifying the center position, I then create and set the coordinates so that this position becomes the center of the map on the screen. Then I set the zoom level for the map. Finally, in order to draw this map, I have to create a canvas. This canvas corresponds to the frame buffer. Then, I call the renderMap function of the map to render the map on the canvas. If the show command of the canvas is called, the map is displayed in the frame buffer. The listener object used in the map class is the iMap service listener. The functions to be implemented in this object are onMapContent updated, onMapRequest aborted, and onMapRequest error occurred. Let's look at each of these functions in detail. The onMapContent updated function is the function that's called when the map is updated. In general, this function should redraw the updated map. The next function is the onMapRequest aborted function. This function is called when the map request has been aborted. If an error occurred during the request, the onMapRequest error occurred function is called. With this function, the appropriate operations should be performed according to the error MSG or error code. Next, let's have a look at the geocoding service provider. The major function of the geocoding service provider is the conversion process between the street address and the coordinates. I'll explain this in more detail by looking at an example. As before, I prepared the information necessary to connect to the server and received a geocoding type provider by calling the Connect to Service Provider N function of the Provider Manager. Then, I specified the address and listener for the geocode function of the provider. The server will then convert the address into coordinates. If the operation is completed, we call the onGeocoding request result received end function of the iGeocoding service listener geocoding object. To get the address from the coordinates, we have to call the onReverse geocoding request result received end function. Now, let's have a look at the onGeocoding request result received end function. The coordinates received from the conversion are returned through the landmark list. This example gets the first item from the list and extracts the qualified coordinate from the item to get the coordinates corresponding to the address. Next, I'll explain the directory service. The directory service finds landmarks including human-readable IDs, name, categories, keywords, and location information, such as the address or geographic area. For example, this function can be used to find a cafe within 500 meters from the current hotel. Now, let's take a look at the actual procedures to find that coffee shop. In this example, I prepared the server login information to connect to the server. Then, I acquired a directory type provider from the provider manager. Now, I have to set the filter. After I acquired the filter from the provider, I set the keyword for the filter as coffee. Then, the search is performed by using the filter, and we can get the result asynchronously. The search result can be acquired by calling the onDirectory request result received end function of the iDirectory service listener object. In this case, the result is provided in the landmark list. In this example, I got an enumerator from the landmark list and traversed through the list, printing the name of each landmark item. So let's take a look at the route service provider. The route service provides a route between a starting point and an endpoint. You can specify the preferences for the route search, such as areas to avoid, features to avoid, and the transportation mode. This means by car or on foot. The result is the route summary, including the distance, the time to the destination, the geometry of the actual route, that's the distance on the map, and the instructions to follow this route. Finally, let's take a look at the map control. Now, the map control is a UI control which displays the map on the screen. While the iMaps interface, introduced earlier, only supports rendering, the map control automatically processes the user interfaces by placing various layers over the map layer. Now, let's wrap up the location namespace. The location namespace provides plenty of location-related features. First, the location provider provides functions related to the device's current position. The landmark and landmark store manage interesting location information as a database. Location services include map, geocoding, directory, and route services. The map service provides functions to render a map image. Geocoding provides functions to support the conversion between the address and the coordinates. The directory provider provides functions to search for a location in a user-friendly method. The route service provides functions to search for routes. And finally, you can create a powerful map user interface using map control.